Hello, everybody. Welcome. Am I coming through okay? Can you hear me, Gabby? Yeah, good. Esteban, where are you? In the Millennium Falcon?
Yeah, I am. I prefer to keep my room private.
That's awesome. I like the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, I just went on a ride a couple weeks ago. It's awesome.
What is it, like wallpaper or something?
Yeah, it's just a background.
That's cool. He's joining us from the Death Star. Let's see. I'm going to see if we can get one or two more in here. I think today will be fun for you guys. It'll be a change of pace from last week's technical grind. Here's what I can do while we wait for some stragglers to come in. So most of you did great on the worksheet. There was a couple of folks. If you happen to be one of the folks that did poorly, you probably got a message from me asking if you wanted to have a Zoom meeting or something to go over that material. And if you want, I can just take a look at it really quick. I suspect that most of you probably did okay. Most people, about half the people aced it, and then about half of the remaining half got like 6 right, maybe 5. And there was only a few people that sort of bombed it. And I suspect that that's because they didn't read the PDF or whatever, or missed the lecture, one of the two. Do we need to go over that, or are you all fairly copper bottomed on that? I think I kind of feel like it's self-explanatory, especially after you look at that PDF I gave you. The one note that I will say though is of all of the questions that people missed, I think the one that was the most missed out of all of them was the question about the maximum write speed to the card. And if you recall, there were 2 ways to decipher that. I don't know if I have a card handy here. Let's see. Yeah. So this is a regular card. Okay. So if you got a card like this, so we can get it right, you can see that it says 94 megabytes per second in the top upper left corner, right? So that's the read speed of the card, not the write speed. That's the read speed of the card. Okay. The write speed is going to be indicated by one of 2 things. On this particular card, you can see, I don't know if I got something pointy. You can see in the upper, that's the upper left side there. You see a 10 with a C around it. Okay. That means class 10 speed card. Okay, speed class 10. So does anybody remember what the minimum write speed of class 10 was? It's 10 megabytes per second, class 10, right? But there was a caveat, and that caveat was, because this is like you could consider this, I mean, this card will accommodate video, but it's really kind of a photographic card, or it's for HD video, maybe not necessarily for 4K. So if you were going to shoot 4K, you would want a video card. I think I got one at my GH4 here. Let's see. Do I? I don't feel it. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here's a Lexar Media Professional card. And you see at the, where is it? Right next to SDXC. I don't know if you can see that. It says V60, right? V for video, right? And really 4K video, because like I said, that other card would handle HD just fine. And in that little GH4, it actually takes the low bit rate out of the GH4 fine. I think the GH4's bit rate is 100 or 150. But we talked about the GH5 last week, and we talked about that screaming fast 400 megabits per second write speed of that camera. So the V60 card is what I'm using in that GH5, right? So video stands for 60. If you see a V designation on that card, whatever that number is after the V is going to be the maximum write speed. So like in a perfect world, if the camera's working fine, it's not overheating, and you don't have a data intensive shot with a lot of detail, okay, it can write as fast as 60 megabytes per second, which is pretty fast, okay? So if there's no V designation on the card, then your next most reliable piece of information is going to be that class 10, okay, which will tell you what your minimum write speed is. But your max write speed is designated by the V spec if the card has a V on it. V30, V60, V90. Okay. So that question was maybe a little bit tricky in that regard, because I mean, if there's no V designation for the card, then the maximum write speed would have been the class 10 designation, or 10 megabytes. But when it's a V card, which was what was in your sample on the worksheet, then the V spec supersedes the class 10 spec. Okay, the class 10 is telling you the minimum write speed, and the V classification is telling you the maximum write speed. Okay, so that's the difference there. Everybody else pretty much got the other questions, and I think unfortunately, if you missed that one, it also relegated you to missing the other, which was what was the speed class question. A lot of you missed that one also, if you missed the one about the max write speed. So, you know, but if anybody wants to go over that in a Zoom session, we can do that. Okay. So let's see what we got here. Looks like we got everybody now. We got everybody that's coming. A little bit better than last week, actually. 18 folks. That's good. Okay. So let me go to my screen share, and we can do our little dance. Okay. Shrink that. Let's go to the class. Okay. So I want to go to module. So we're in week 5 now. So today I want to talk to you about building cameras. So I'll put the lecture, as always, up here. And then the videos that are in the presentation, I'm not going to show them today during our talk. You can go back and check those out for deeper dives into what I'm going to show you in this discussion. And everything else is the same. Downloadable PDFs, your reading assignment. There's a discussion post. That's pretty simple. What I'd like you to do is, based on what we talked about in week 3 and 4, so last week and the week before, and then what we talk about today, I want you to do a little thinking and maybe a little research You may already know the answer to this question, and this will be a simple discussion for you, but I'd like you to start looking into cameras and tell me which camera that's out there. And it's pretty open-ended. You could give me a variety of answers, but give me some idea what you think your camera of choice is going to be that fits your shooting style. So if you're a video documentary person, you might have one idea about a camera you're going to use. If you want to shoot feature films, that's a different camera. You want to shoot YouTube videos, that's probably yet another type of camera. Um, and think about, so you got to think of, it's kind of a two-pronged question, right? It's like, what kind of filmmaker are you going to be? And then what kind of camera system do you think will support that style of shooting moving forward? Okay. Because not all cameras are created equal. I think I initiated that conversation last week. And then I think you'll see this week that that's truly the case. And therefore, you never want to take on more camera than you need for what you're doing, because that just adds additional pressure. You have to know more about the operation, the function of the camera than you might need to for your application. Or it may just simply have way too many specs, or specs that are way, more than are required of your end user content. For instance, if you're going to shoot exclusively for YouTube, like if you wanted to be a video vlogger, or if you wanted to have a YouTube channel, there'd be absolutely no reason for you to want a red camera or a Blackmagic Ursa Mini 12K, or a red Komodo, or a Z camera F6. Those cameras just have way too many specs for YouTube videos, and you're going to compress the videos out of those cameras so much that you may actually degrade the video files in the process of trying to make them fit on the H.264 codec that YouTube uses. So there's going to be some definite need and some things that you should think about, so that you don't either overinvest, over rent, or try to get a hold of a camera that you simply don't need to do something simple like a weekly vlog or something of that nature. So I think it'll be a fun discussion for you guys. It shouldn't be too labor intensive or research intensive. And maybe you've already got a sense of what that camera is. And of course, that's terrific. Just give me a little background, why, if you choose the Panasonic GH5, for instance, why do you think that would suit your needs? What are your camera needs going to be moving forward? What's your shooting style? And tell me how the GH5 would fit that. And then, respond to a couple of your classmates. And that's pretty much all I want from you guys this week. Next week, we will continue this conversation. So I'm going to start with a camera, show you a few different types, and then I'll build you the flagship from UCF, the Ursa Mini. And then next week, we'll talk about the lenses that go on those cameras. And then the week after that, we'll talk about filters. So it's kind of an extended conversation over the next 3 weeks. This one being the lead off discussion about the camera itself. Okay. So let's take a look at my little, where is it? My little presentation here. And so we're in week 5. This is deck 5. Somebody asked me, I don't know if it was in this class or not, if I was going to put PDFs or if I was going to put my decks up on web courses. I'm using Keynote. I'm not using an Excel program to create these presentations, or I'm not using whatever the Microsoft version of Keynote is. So when I generate PDFs from these presentations, for some reason, my nice black perforated background turns light gray. And so it makes the text a little difficult to see. But I'm putting all of these lectures up on video on YouTube, so you can kind of watch them at your leisure if you wanted to, look over the lectures again for some reason, if you're studying for the midterm, for instance. So that's why I haven't been putting a PDF version of these presentations up on the web courses. If you think that that would be helpful to you, I can start making PDFs of these presentations. But like I said, they can be a little difficult to read sometimes because my backgrounds change color. I don't know why. I've asked a number of people what the problem might be, and I haven't gotten a satisfactory answer of late. So you guys let me know. Somebody send me an email if you think that if you really want the PDFs, I'll start generating PDFs from these Keynote files. Okay. So today we're going to build us a couple of cameras. So I like this quote from Gordon Willis. He says, a cinematographer is a visual psychiatrist, moving an audience, making them think the way you want them to think, and painting pictures in the dark. And in order to do that, of course, you're going to need your camera. So Gordon Willis is famous for having shot, anybody know Gordon Willis? Know that name? He shot 3 very iconic movies. It's a series of 3 from the 70s and early 80s. The Godfather trilogy. So Gordon Willis gave us The Godfather. His images in dailies were so dark, the studio execs nicknamed him the Prince of Darkness. And apparently he had a little bit of a temper, so that matched his reputation for, being the Prince of Darkness. But Gordon Willis, he died year before last, I believe. Academy Award-winning DP, very talented guy. And so I gave you a little quote from him. So today I'm going to build an Ursa Mini. I'll talk about EVF, lenses, batteries, an external monitor, and your tripod connectivity. Anybody like Don Henley? A little quote from Don Henley here. We found the lock, we turned the key, we're shaking up those building blocks, going deeper into that box and building the perfect beast. That's off one of his solo albums. So that's what I call, this lecture, building the perfect beast. So again, the form factor that you choose for a camera is going to be very strongly dictated by the type of shooting that you're going to do. Okay, so for some of you, the iPhone may be completely sufficient for the type of work that you're going to do. Like if you're a holiday vlogger and your thing is like going to restaurants and talking about what kind of food you're eating or where you're going on vacation and stuff, the iPhone might be the perfect tool for you. It doesn't make it the wrong camera. It makes it the perfect tool for you and maybe the wrong camera for somebody shooting a feature like The Godfather. Okay. There's no perfect camera. And the sooner we wrap our head around that notion, the happier we're all going to be, I think. Because if there's one thing that's frustrating about YouTube is watching these people just chase their tail and run in circles trying to figure out what the best video camera is. And that really is an absurd question because there's no one good answer because we're not all the same filmmaker. So you really have to qualify your tools to the work that you're doing. So the iPhone might be good for you. The GoPro might be good for you. The DSLR, the mirrorless DSLR, the ENG video camera, in other words, a traditional style camera with a built-in lens and a built-in viewfinder, that might be the way to go for you. Or a traditional cinema camera, and then some version of a cinema build might be the answer for you if you're going to shoot a feature. Okay, it all depends. It depends on how much help you have. Camera assistants are required for pretty much any cinema camera that you're going to use. So, if you're shooting with a fully built out Ursa Mini or an Arri Alexa or a Red Komodo, you're probably going to have at least one camera assistant, maybe 2. And you're going to have, a grip department that'll help you move camera equipment around like cranes and dollies and jibs. And, you might have a steady cam operator. You're going to have a lot of support, in other words, if you're working in what we call a cinematic footprint. Okay. But if you're out shooting news, you're not going to use a cinema camera. That would be absurd, right? You're going to use an ENG style camera, which is designed around a single operator who's working alone with one reporter tied to the other end of an XLR cable with a microphone. And that workflow is another kind of camera altogether. Okay. And so on and so on. That's the point of this. is really look at what the options are and see if you can figure out the best option for you for the work that you're doing at that moment. Okay. So as I said before, the best camera is the one you have access to right now. So if you need to shoot something today, what have you got at your fingertips? If it's just your cell phone, then learn to work within the limitations of that device. And you can probably come up with some very compelling images if you match the capabilities of that tool to the problem at hand, right? And that's really all we're doing in many aspects of filmmaking is we're taking a look at the broad problem of creating this scene or this shot or this movie, qualifying it by a set of logistical issues associated with this project, and then qualifying all of our tools, our lights, our cameras, our audio gear, the size of our crew, and matching need with solutions, right? So that we don't overspend or overwork a problem. Okay. Okay. So ideally, in any given situation, the first thing you're going to ask yourself is, for what I'm doing, what's the camera with the best specs within either my price range, my rental budget range, or uh, with context to my project, what specs do I need to accomplish my project? And start with that piece of information to start researching cameras and figure out which one's the best one for you. At UCF, again, if you guys go to the operational portal, this is where you can access their equipment inventory, and you can see all the different camera platforms that they have available that you can check out when it comes time for you to start shooting your film projects for your classes. Okay, so you can always start here at the UCF operational portal, find out what kind of cameras they have, how many of each type that they have, and what the specs are. And in many cases, they also have tutorials, like under the training tab here. They'll probably have a tutorial about that specific camera. And if they don't, it might be because they teach seasonal classes on that equipment. And so what you'll do is sign up for a class. For instance, if you were going to use their flagship equipment, the Ursa Minis, there's 8 of those at UCF. And before you're allowed to check those cameras out, they require that you take their in-person camera training class, and they'll go over the Ursa Mini, what the specs are, how to build it, how to reconfigure it in a variety of different ways for the type of work that you're going to do. And it's kind of like a qualifying class. It certifies you to then check out the Ursa Minis based on availability. Anytime you have a project and you want to use those cameras. Okay, it's all based on availability, because I think there's 600 of you in the program right now, or more maybe, and there's not nearly that number of cameras in the equipment inventory. So first come, first serve, and time is always of the essence. And just bear that in mind when you start shooting projects for your classes. But as far as their inventory goes, like I said, their flagship is the Ursa Mini 4.6K. Okay. And I consulted with UCF before I started teaching with UCF. I consulted with their film department because they were transitioning into a new kind of a program, and they had a lot of old systems that were just no good anymore. They were either broken or they just didn't match the need of the new program. So we took a look at a lot of different equipment. And my strongest recommendation to UCF at the time was the Blackmagic Ursa Mini cameras, because at the time they had the best specs for the best cost. So per dollar, the Ursa Minis packed the most value for the price tag. So UCF went with 8 of these systems. They also have Canon systems in place. So they have 60Ds and 5Ds and stuff. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. In total, I think their total inventory is something like 40, about 50 cameras, I think. The bulk of them are little Panasonic bridge cameras, which are small, compact, kind of like the GH4 with a built-in lens, and there's 30 of those. So there's 8 Ursa minis, there's 8 60Ds, there's I think 6 or 8 pocket cinema cameras and so forth, a couple of 5Ds and so forth. This one has the best specs of all of those. It's also the most highly sought after amongst the master's students who are doing their thesis films. The seniors that are doing capstone films also usually go for the Ursa minis because it's, you know, the camera with the best specs that we have at UCF. But you don't have to go that route. We've also got the 5D. I think there's 2 of those at UCF right now. And the 60D. Of course, I'm showing you a 70D in this image, but the 60D is basically the one generation earlier than the 70D. And the upgrades from the 60D to the 70D really, ironically, don't have much to do with the video capture capability, and they have more to do with the autofocus, photographic oriented features of the camera. So the 60D is at this point not really a deficit for you if you wanted to shoot with a DSLR. So this has an optical viewfinder in the 60D. So what you see through the viewfinder is what the lens is seeing. And that's a handy way to work. It's not a really big camera, right? It's fairly small. And there's plenty of those to work with out of the film equipment room as well. We also have this version of the Pocket Cinema camera, which is the HD version. The new 4K version was supposed to be ordered for this past year, but there were some problems with the bids and stuff, and so we didn't get those cameras the way we'd planned. These are something that'll be coming in the future, but for now, these shoot 4K. These only shoot HD. But for now, I mean, if you're shooting for, like I said, for YouTube, if you're putting your video up on web courses or something, you don't want to shoot 4K files for that anyway, because they're too big and they have to be compressed just to fit on the presentation medium that you're going to use. So these cameras remain very viable for that application. We were also planning on getting you guys some GH5s. That didn't happen. These were a couple $1,000s a piece when they first came out. The bridge cameras were a compromise. We got you 30 of those at a significantly reduced price. And they will shoot, as far as I recall, they will shoot 4K 24p. So it's kind of like, you know, having a GH5, but you don't have the interchangeable lens capability in the FZ1000s that are at UCF right now. That's okay for some of your basic classes. Like if you wanted to check one of those out, for instance, I'm going to give you I think a couple of shooting assignments this semester. If you wanted to go to the campus and check out an FZ1000 to shoot your project with, you could certainly do that. There's enough of those cameras to be able to accommodate people. So those are available to you right now. Some of these other cameras, like the Ursa Minis, won't be available to you until next year, I think, when you become either a late junior or a early semester senior. Okay. If you have ambitions outside of the equipment available at UCF, there's always renting. Okay. You can always rent cameras to test them out, to try them. If you think you're going to buy something, you can rent the camera first and try it out and see if you like it or not. See if it, you know, agrees with you ergonomically, or if it, you know, generates the kind of pictures that you want. Renting is a really good way to qualify equipment platforms ahead of time, so that you're not using an unknown quantity when you go out and shoot a project. The last thing you want to do if you have a video project that you have to shoot, even if it's for school, you don't want to go out with a piece of gear that you're unfamiliar with. So you can treat the UCF equipment room just like a rental house. Go sign up to check out a camera and shoot with it over the weekend and see if it, you know, see how it works. Read the instruction manual, shoot some images with it, and see how you feel about that piece of gear. And then you'll know, so that when you have a project to come up that you have to shoot with, you're comfortable with the camera. The camera's not presenting a barrier to a successful shoot. right? And professionals do that all the time. In fact, there's a video up on web courses for you to check out in your spare time. Cinematographer Gavin Finney is talking about testing cameras and lenses and why you want to do that. And he talks fairly extensively on the topic. It's a good idea. Professionals do it all the time. The last thing you want to do is get hired to shoot somebody's movie, and then they tell you they've already made an equipment deal with a rental house because who knows, the production manager or the producer have a relationship with a particular rental house. And so they went straight to that same client and they got a really good deal on the camera. And unless you have some really good reason, some strong objections to what they've already acquired, you'll end up using what they provide to you. And at that point, you want to be sure that you know how to use that piece of equipment. Otherwise, you're going to be in, you might be in trouble in terms of, having to give that job up, or, maybe trying to wing it and use a camera you never used before and make some errors or something that you can't fix very easily or inexpensively in post. So you definitely want to consider this as an option moving forward. Maybe not so much while you're in school now, but certainly when you get out of school before you start shooting professionally for clients. In Orlando, there's a few different rental houses. VER is a big professional rental house. They're down off of I-4, I believe. They've got lighting and camera support and lots of different kinds of cameras. They've got red cameras and they've got ENG cameras. And so when something like a live event or a concert or a sporting event comes to town, a lot of times the producers will hire local equipment to fill out the need, like extra cameras for the stadiums at a football game, or extra cameras to cover action at a rock concert, stuff like that. So that's kind of where VER fits into the scheme of things. They're kind of at the apex of the rental community here in Orlando. But if you scale that idea back a little bit, we've also got Lens Depot. These guys are, I think they're in Winter Garden, the Lens Depot. They've also got a shop out in Tampa. They got a website. You can contact them. They carry all kinds of stuff. So right here, you can see they carry like quadcopters and gimbals and radio controlled focusing systems and all that kind of stuff. They're pretty good group of people to work with. And then we've got Borrow Lenses, and Borrow Lenses is they do internet mail business. So you can go to their website and rent a piece of gear from them and they'll ship it to you wherever you are. And then when you're done with it, you ship it back to them. Who's this? Lens Pal. I think these guys, I believe, are the closest ones to the campus. I believe Lens Pal is over in Oviedo. And they're near the 415, I think it is. And they're a lot like Lens Pro. They got basically the same stuff. They got cameras, lenses, lighting, tripods, camera support. They got all kinds of stuff. And they work with UCF students a lot. So if you have a credit card number you can give them for a deposit, they'll rent pretty much anything out of their inventory to UCF students without a question. So here's your pre-existing rental relationship very close to the school already. If you get an idea, for instance, let's say you want to try a gimbal. Let's say you're thinking that you might want to buy one or you want to use one on one of your film projects and you've never used one before. You can go rent it from these guys from 50 or $100 or whatever for the week. Take it out and try it, learn how to use it, get good with it, and then when it comes time to shoot your project, you'll have a little experience with that tool before it actually counts for something. So I think this is a good idea to consider moving forward to the rental option. In terms of camera specs are important. Okay, you should try to get the best specs you can in a piece of gear, but more importantly than that is understand that you can have a really expensive fancy camera with the best specs in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, it's not going to be of any value to you. So this is why you want to do a little bit of practice and a little bit of sort of pre-education, experimentation, maybe through renting to learn how to use this gear ahead of time. What matters more is your creative drive behind your project. Okay, so virtually any camera will suffice if you have a really good understanding of what kind of images you need, and you know how to extract those kinds of images from whatever tools placed in your hand. That's really the definition of a professional cinematographer anyway, is they have a project, they have some sense of the images they want, some direction in terms of what those images tonally need to represent. And then they're offered, they're given access to equipment to make that happen. Sometimes it's the cameras that you prefer. Sometimes it's cameras you don't prefer, but they're available and they were cheap or whatever. And you have to use that tool. And so you go in there and you make it happen. Okay. Learning only one camera platform is never going to help you very much, because unless you own that camera and it's always available when you need it, there's going to come a point where you might go to the UCF equipment room and you want to check out an Ursa Mini, but they're already all gone. They've already been checked out. All they got left are, Blackmagic pocket cameras or 60Ds. Then you've got to know how to make the 60D work for your project. Okay. All right. So if we're going to build a camera, there's going to be a few things that we're going to need. We're going to need a sturdy tripod. So I've got one. I got one of my tripods here. This is a Manfrotto 516, which I don't think they make this particular head anymore. This will take a payload of 25 pounds. It's fluid resistant. So as you pan it and tilt it, there are actually oil cartridges inside the head that offer a very steady resistance, so that when you're panning and tilting as you're recording, you get these very smooth moves, which is what you want when you're shooting video. So when you're shooting video with a digital video or digital cinema camera, make sure you're using a tripod that is designed for shooting video specifically. And it will have what we call a fluid head, which is what this is. It's a Manfrotto 516 fluid head. All fluid heads will have a load rating because the oil cartridges have to work with whatever the intended weight of the device is going to be that you're working with. Since I tend to work with heavier cinema cameras, even the digital ones, when I build something out, it ends up generally being somewhere between 20 and 30 pounds. So I made sure that I got heads that could handle that kind of weight. Much smaller tripods might only have a working payload of maybe 10 pounds, 8 pounds, 15 pounds. If that's the case, you want to make sure that your camera build, whatever it is, doesn't exceed that weight limit. Otherwise, you should really get a bigger tripod. And it will be for reasons of your fluid tension being, smooth enough for your pans and tilts, but also the tripod itself. If you put too heavy of a camera on a light duty tripod, first thing that you create is a top heavy accident waiting to happen. So if you have the camera on, we call them sticks. If you have the camera on sticks on set and it's real heavy and you walk away from it to get a cup of coffee or to go to the bathroom or even to walk over to talk to somebody, and somebody walks by and brushes that camera and just tips the thing right over, because the tripod was, underrated for the camera, now you've got a very expensive problem. So make sure that, you get a tripod that's sturdy, can handle the weight, and it has a fluid head. Okay. There's a nice little video that I put on Web Courses for you. It's from the B&H folks from New York City, the big photo video wholesaler. And they have a video education division, and they create videos. And I pulled their video on how to select a tripod. So that's up on Web Courses for you to check out as well. Okay. What else? We're going to need lenses. We can use a variety of different types of lenses. I've got some stuff to show you today, and then I'll go into a bigger conversation about lenses next week. You might want an external recorder for a variety of reasons, and I'll talk a little bit about that today. I have a video that I will put up on Web Courses for you to check out as well that will give you a much more extensive discussion about video monitors. But for now, for this discussion today, I'm just going to touch on it briefly. It's not something that you always need an external monitor. Cameras like the Ursa Mini, I'm going to show you in a minute, have a nice flip out onboard screen, which is ample in terms of size and brightness for you to use as your shooting monitor. So you don't always need an external monitor. I'll just touch on it here. You may need a microphone if you're recording audio. And then I'll talk to you briefly about slating. I know that I gave you guys a video to watch week before last on proper slating. So I'll just touch on that again today, just to sort of refresh your memory. So let's build a camera. So I have right now in my possession the Ursa Mini. And so let me go to, let's see, stadium mode here on my thumbnails so I can see everybody. And let's show you, okay. So here's the Ursa Mini, okay. This is just the body. And when it comes out of the Pelican case, it's already, it already has the handle installed on it. You can take the handle off. You need a couple of Allen wrenches to do it. And in the interest of time, I left it attached, since when you pull it out of the UCF Pelican, it's already attached anyway. So understand that it does come off if you ever needed it to, but it'll come assembled at least this far when you get it from the equipment room at UCF, okay? It's got the UCF sticker on there for tracking, and it's got a barcode that they'll scan when you rent it or when you check it out from school, so they know which body you have. And then, of course, when you rented it, when it's due back, and so forth. So there's inventory tracking and serial numbers here. That's what those stickers are all about. But you have a little bit of control in terms of the camera, record, start and stop, some menu access, and you also have some playback access right here on the outside. This is the flip out screen, and you're going to be able to look at your video image here. As soon as I power up the camera, I'll show you how nice the screen is. Inside are your principal controls for the camera. So you got some audio control. You have slots for your recording media. You have control buttons again for playback and for menu access. Power on and off, and record on and off inside underneath the viewing screen. Okay. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you get your camera is get the screwdriver out of the tool set that they probably send with you as well. And you're going to look for a couple of things. You're going to look for what we call the sham plate, which is a plate like this. And we're going to look for the rod base plate, which looks like this. The two of these hook together and clamp together. First things first, we want to put this on the tripod. So you're going to take the quick release plate out of the tripod, okay? And you're going to mount it to the bottom of your sham plate. Now, I've already mounted one here, again, for the interest of time. So you just screw it on there, okay? I kind of center it on the bottom of the sham plate, okay? This little notch right here is the front of the camera under the lens. So the camera is going to kind of toe in and lock with the lens pointed that way. So what I do is I mount the quick release plate slightly forward, and you'll see why in a few minutes. There's going to be a lot of camera body and then a heavy battery mounted on the backside. So I basically biased the plate slightly forward so that the camera will balance on the video fluid head. Okay. So you want to take your sham plate, mount your quick release plate to it, and then just install that into your tripod and listen for the click so you know it locks in place like that. So now it's locked in there. If I need to get it out, I have to push this red quick release button here, and I can pull the plate back out. Now, that's where the release button is on the Manfrotto 516. On any of the Manfrotto tripod heads, the button will be red. It's just a question of where it will be located on the tripod head itself. And so different tripod heads will have different release button locations. So just familiarize yourself with that ahead of time so you don't look silly on set trying to get your plate off and you can't get it off. Okay, but put it on there, wait for the click. And then I usually center the plate in the tripod head. And then there's a lockdown dog on the other side here. Just lock that in place. so that this now becomes part of the fluid head. It's all one system. Okay. Now we're going to take that other plate, okay, the rod base plate, which is also an integrated shoulder pad, and we're going to mount that to the bottom of the camera. So the camera has a series of mounting holes on the bottom, okay, of the camera. And these are all, there's little helicoil thread certs in here. They're all 1/4-20 thread dimension, okay, which is a pretty common American standard size screw. It's 1/4-20, it's called. Okay, and this is where we're going to mount this this rod base plate too. So basically we're going to turn the camera upside down, and then I'm going to mount the rod base plate on these two holes right here. So slightly back from, it's basically the opposite of the way I mounted the quick release plate. The quick release plate is slightly forward, and my shoulder pad will be slightly backwards. And then I have a longer range of adjustment motion once I get it all built and put together, and I'll show you how that works. So I'm just going to mount this thing on here. There are 2 captured screws that are inside this plate already. There's a machined out groove here. There's a channel inside the foam recess, and it's for a straight slot screwdriver. And these won't fall out for the most part. They're captured in there. But what you got to do is you have to sort of space them out to line up with the spacing of the screw holes on the Ursa Mini, about 1 inch apart, basically. Inch, maybe 1 1/4 inches. And then you're going to want to hold the camera and sort of mount this thing on there. So I'm going to set it right down on there with the screws lined up over the holes. And then I'm just going to take my screwdriver and get that thing mounted in there. There's one. It's a little fiddly, but once you get it mounted on there, you shouldn't have to take it off. Now, because I got the screws set where I do, there's a little bit of adjustment travel on this plate as well. That's to get it so that it will sit right where you want it to sit on your shoulder when you've got it fully built. So you have that little bit of balance adjustment. So I usually pull it all the way back and then tighten the screws down. And hand tight should be sufficient. You don't have to hog down on these screws, okay? They will grab and they'll tighten if you use the screwdriver they provide for you at the UCF equipment room, okay? This is what we call a stubby, and it gives you enough leverage to put a nice tight turn on it without over tightening the screws and either breaking the screws or stripping the threads or damaging the gear. So that's now on there, and it's mounted pretty good. And like I said, it gives us a shoulder pad if we're going to hold the camera on our shoulder. And it also provides this accessory access that we're going to need when we start putting other pieces and bits and bobs on this camera. Okay, so I don't know if you can see those holes in the front there. And then on the bottom is a key-shaped wedge. Oop, we got a latecomer here. This key-shaped wedge fits in that key-shaped hole I showed you on the sham plate, and it's going to lock the camera in place. So we tow it in, and we wait for the click, and it's locked in place. Okay. If you want to get the camera back off, if you got something you want to do, you can pull the release lever, and that will release the camera from the sham plate. Okay. So we're going to click it in, lock it in place, and then I'm going to put some more gear on this camera. The first thing we might want to power up the camera is a battery. So on the back, we have an Anton Bauer battery plate right here. Okay, so I'm going to take out of the same Pelican case that I got the camera body. There will be 3 or 4 of these, I call them clown batteries, the Anton Bauer ENG batteries. And they mount with a gold mount lug system like this onto the back of the camera, these 3 holes, and everything just lines up and clicks into place like that. Okay. Not too bad. But now we got a little power indicator right here. It tells me how much battery life I have in the battery itself. And this one's at about 80%. So that's pretty good for a demonstration for today. So now we got a battery in place. So there's going to be other stuff that we're going to want. Okay. We might want now to select a lens. When you select a lens for your camera, you're either going to choose maybe a lens that you already own. A photographic lens can be adapted to fit on this camera. The lens mount on this camera is on the front, and it happens to be a native Canon EF electrosonic focus, a Canon EF lens mount. Okay. Blackmagic licensed the Canon EF lens mount for their Ursa cameras because there were a lot of people that were out renting Canon cameras already. A lot of people own Canon cameras, and they might have had a 5D system and they want to move up to a more professional camera body, but they don't want to have to buy all new lenses or have to rent special lenses. So they wanted to use their Canon equipment. So Blackmagic said, okay, we'll put a native Canon EF mount on these cameras. And if you've got Canon glass already, then you're ahead of the game. Right. So a lot of people would have things like the Sigma 18-35, which is a photographic zoom lens, right? But it also works really, really nicely for video in many applications. If you're a one-man shooter and you don't have an assistant or anything and you're doing your own hand focusing, or in some cases, maybe a little bit of auto focusing. If you already had one of these for your still camera, you could put it on the Ursa Mini if you wanted to. It'll go right on. The thing of it is a photographic lens isn't necessarily ideally suited for shooting video. Okay. I'll talk more about that situation next week when I talk specifically about lenses. But you could mount a lens like this on here and go like that. You could. But since I'm building a cinema camera, I'd rather show you a cinema lens. And so we can get either a cinema zoom lens or a cinema, what we call a prime lens. A prime lens is a lens with only one magnification value, one field of view. A zoom lens, you can adjust that lens and it'll show you a variety of different fields of view based on how you adjust it. Okay. But if we were to get a still photographic lens for our cinema camera, we might pick one of the zines from the UCF equipment inventory. So this is a cinema lens. It's about the same length as my 18-35 photographic zoom, but this is just a 50mm lens. So it only shows me one magnification, one point of view. Whereas this one is 18mm to 35mm. It gives me a variety of wider fields of view that I can look at. So sometimes you might want a zoom lens, sometimes you might want a prime lens. I'm going to show you a prime lens just for the sake of building this thing. So I'll leave that over here. We'll take our 50mm lens, and there's usually a witness mark or a little colored red or white bead, something on the mount to indicate to you where you start, where you key it into the lens port, and then you're going to twist it and lock it in place. So the lens port is here. And you can see on the EF lens port, there's a red dot at the top at 12 o'clock on the lens flange, okay, on the port flange. The lens flange has a white dot, and inside there's a red dot. I don't know if you can see it. It's right there on the rim, okay? So I'm going to hold the lens so that the red dot here lines up with the red dot there. And then I'm going to put the lens flange right into the port. So this is the lens flange, and you can see it's kind of got what we call a bayonet on here. So in order to lock this or position it onto the camera, we're going to kind of put the port together, just like the rocket ships lock to the space station. Same basic principle, right? We're going to go into the lens port and we're going to click it in place, and it will lock in place and it won't come off. All right. So I'm going to line up the red dots. Here's my red dot here. I'm going to put that at 12 o'clock. I got my red dot here at 12 o'clock. And then I'm just going to dock the spaceship to the space station, right? Like that. And then turn it till it clicks. Did you hear the click? When I hear the click, I know it's locked in place and it's not going to come off. If you don't hear the click, don't let go of the lens because it probably didn't attach properly. And if you just look in the gap here, you'll see if the lens is actually mounted correctly or not. So this lens is now fixed to the camera. It's on there, okay? And I can let go, okay? Now, we're gonna need some stuff because the way the camera is set up now, we have power and we have a lens. And if we wanna use our flip out viewfinder, okay, that would be sufficient for us to shoot with this camera because the image that the camera sees through the lens, power it up, you'll be able to see that on the monitor. Now I'm pointing at a black curtain, so there's nothing really detail-wise to see. But if I hit the menu button, you can see how you get information on the viewfinder, okay? Okay, and this is the menu information you can access if you wanted to make adjustments to the camera. And then when you're gonna get to shoot, you'll see the viewfinder with whatever's in front of the camera. And then your basic adjustments are down here. And the nice thing about the Ursa Mini, one of the reasons why it's one of our better cameras is this is a touch control, what we call a touch control LCD panel. So if I wanted to change some information here, if I touch the piece of information I want to change, I'll get controls that I can adjust by fingertip response, and I can control the camera just by using the touch panel, which is kind of nice. Otherwise, you can go through the menu system and you can touch the specific settings you want to control, and then that'll pop up with another page that'll give you the range of adjustments you can make. So you got a couple of different ways to control this camera, which is kind of nice. I'm gonna turn it back off to save battery power, I think. Okay. Okay. So you could use the camera just like this if you wanted to. This is about as stripped down as it gets. So if you wanted the camera to be as small and light as possible, you could go with a stripped down build, we call it. Okay. But I'm going to put a few more bits and bobs on this thing to show you kind of what a comfortable cinema build is going to look like. Okay. So the first thing we're going to add, I'm going to close this for ease of grabbing this thing. We might want to add an eyepiece. When you shoot outside with the LCD screen on these cameras, if the sun's in the right place, if it's behind you, for instance, and you're pointed this way and you're trying to look at the screen outside, a lot of times the screen's not bright enough, and so it's really hard to see the image and gauge what you've got. If that's the case, you might want a viewfinder so that you can look into the darkened viewfinder and see a well-exposed image inside. And then you can also see the menu. You can get the menu to project inside the EVF, and you can control your camera settings by looking through the EVF. So on the Ursa Mini, we have a full HD resolution EVF, and it looks like this, okay? And so you have an eyepiece, you have a diopter here. If you wear glasses, like I wear reading glasses, right? So if I was going to use this camera without my reading glasses, I would put my eye to the viewfinder when it's on the camera, and I would focus the lens to infinity, and then I would set the diopter to my own eye so that it would become sharp and clear and easy for me to operate the camera through the eyepiece without my glasses, okay? So that's a really nice feature to have. And it's got incremental adjustments on here. I don't know if you can see the numbers, but there's a witness mark on top. And then there's a series of incremental numbers, okay? If you have a DP and a camera operator on your project, right? The DP might want to come in and set the shot, right? Frame it all up and then lock everything off and turn the camera over to the operator, okay? The DP might wear glasses and the operator doesn't wear glasses. So the camera assistant, when the DP steps up to the eyepiece, is going to dial in the camera, the DP's diopter by using the numbers, right? And then the DP can use the case, he's going to flip his glasses up, use the camera, And he's going to say, okay, that's the frame I want to start with. Then the operator steps in. He or she doesn't wear glasses, so the camera assistant dials the diopter back to neutral, and the camera operator looks through the viewfinder without any extra magnification. Okay, so this is a really nice feature to have. We have these on major motion pictures because there's always at least a couple of sets of eyes, and maybe a third set if the director wants to look through the lens as well. And so the diopter, you know, different people with different glasses prescriptions need different diopter adjustments. Okay, so this little slot right here is going to slot into the top of the camera right under the top handle. Okay, so if I turn this kind of this way, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a little sort of channel right under the top handle, and that's where this tongue is going to go. And it's going to go right under there. And we got a lockdown screw to lock that puppy in place, just like that. So now that's locked in with a screw inside the handle, and it's not going to come off. And we can adjust the viewfinder however we need to. On the other side, since it's an electronic viewfinder, we have a couple of things that we need to do. We need to power up the electronic viewfinder. So there's an XLR 12 volt power plug that needs to go into the camera right here. And then there's a video signal that needs to be sent from the camera to the EVF so that we can look at our images in the EVF. And that is this little SDI cable that attaches right above the power cable. Now we've got video and power running to the EVF. And that's coming right out of these two ports on the dumb side of the camera. We call this the dumb side. The side of the camera that has all the control is called the smart side, or we used to call that the LA side. That's where I used to stand when I was a camera assistant, on this side of the camera. And then the other side was called the dumb side, or the New York side, where the New York assistants would stand if they had ARRI cameras. The West Coast guys, we all had Panaflex cameras, and so all the control was on this side of the camera. And when the ARRI cameras came out, they had dual sets of controls. So the first thing the camera operators said was, I'm the camera operator, and there's only one side of the camera for the viewfinder to go on. That's my side. You got to go to the other side of the camera. Well, if it was an ARRI camera, you could do that real easily because you had controls on both sides of the camera. If it was a Panaflex, we had to go to the dumb side, and then we were kind of working blind. So just a little fun fact for you folks from the heyday of film camera assistant work. All right, so I got a lens on the front, I got a viewfinder, I got a battery. I can operate this camera really nicely. Okay. Some of these cinema cameras get kind of heavy, and so there's lens supports that we can add to the camera to sort of prop up the end of the lens and keep it from flexing on the camera mount. There are also things like follow focus controls that we're going to want to attach to this camera. But in order to do that, I need to access my rod connectivity under the lens, which is that plate we put on first. And I'm going to have a couple of what we call iris rods in the kit in the Pelican case that came with the camera. These happen to be 2-part rods, so you can take them apart and use the short version, or there's a thread on one end of the stubby and there's a thread inside the short rod, and you can screw them both together and make a longer rod. And it just so happens that the lens that I'm going to use, the Cinema Prime and the matte box I'm going to put on, I'll show you next, and the focus assist, I need the rods to be, this is 12 inches long right now. Okay, so I'm going to build them out to 12 inches. They come 6 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches, 15 inches, 19 inches, right? Or they come as multiple parts and you can screw them all together. Whatever, doesn't matter. You need 12 inches on the Ursa Mini with Cinema Primes or a Cinema Zoom. So I got 12-inch sets here. I'm just going to slide them into the holes. And there's a little dog latch right here to tighten it down. So I'm going to make sure it's loose. I put the rod in till it bottoms out, and then just tighten tighten the lockdown lever like that. I'm going to do that twice. So I got one on the smart side and one on the dumb side. Put it in and lock the lever down. And again, just finger tight. You don't got to hog down on it, right? Metal on metal will do what we call gall. And if it galls, it'll get stuck. You'll put such a hard turn on it that you won't be able to get it off. And you might have to use pliers to get the parts, separated. It'll create scratches or dents in the equipment. And then the rental facilities get really upset with you. So if it's a camera, finger tight with the exception of that plate on the bottom, that you want to screw on and put a little bit of a turn. Okay, because that's the only thing connecting the camera to the tripod. If those come apart, the camera takes a dump on the floor. Okay, so but everything else hand tight. Okay, so those are in hand tight. And now what we can do is on a cinema lens, let me show you this little 12 millimeter, it might be easier to hold. On a cinema lens, we got these little teeth right here. You see those teeth? Okay, and they're on the aperture control ring and they're on the focus control ring. Okay, and those are going to help us manipulate the lens from kind of the weird angle that the camera assistant's going to be positioned at the side of the camera. Now, this is different from a still photographic lens in that the still photographic lens is designed to be manipulated with your fingers. So it's got a nice little rubber sticky pad all the way around the focus ring. Same on the zoom range ring. And if there was an f-stop ring, it would have a rubber grippy surface as well. But this is for hand operation. This is a photographic lens, okay? The idea was a film camera, a still camera, was designed to be used with one operator like that. Focus, click, take a picture, right? Focusing, adjusting the f-stops, advance, click, advance, click. Photographic camera. This is a photographic lens designed to work on a photographic camera. A cinema lens, on the other hand, is designed for a system or a group of people working around this cinema camera. The focus puller, the person controlling the focus of the image on a cinema system, isn't necessarily the guy looking through the viewfinder. Okay. And when that's two separate people, the camera assistant has no way of seeing the image here, but they still have to be able to focus the lens, and they might have to do it from a weird angle, or they might do it with remote controls because the camera's on a crane going 30 feet up in the air and the camera assistant's standing on the ground. Okay, but whatever it is, you need to be able to control the focus of that lens. And so they use the teeth so we can apply stuff like these follow focus handles or remote follow focus equipment for working on cranes or working on car rigs or whatever. And all this is a device that has a wheel that has teeth on it, and that wheel turns 90 degrees from the wheel of rotation here because it's going to mount on these rods just like that. And we're going to slide it in place to line up with the teeth on the lens. And that's going to allow us to focus our lens. Okay, you can see it turning here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm going to get it mounted on there. And then with it mounted in that position, I can focus the lens. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's kind of hard to see, but I can focus the lens by turning this wheel, right? Now imagine we're shooting that direction, right? The camera operator has their eye to the viewfinder, and that person's standing right here, really big in the way, right? So I've got to stand sort of over that person's shoulder, slightly behind them. And a lot of times they have their hand on the viewfinder because they can control the metering system and the special programmed buttons and stuff. And I reach right under their arm and grab the focus wheel from back here. And as long as I can see the numbers on the lens, I know where it's focusing at, what distance away it is. And I can focus the camera from way over here and have a camera operator standing right there. So it helps me facilitate adjusting that lens, even if I have to stand at a weird angle to this camera in order to operate it as a focus puller. Okay. And the whole idea is that I'm gonna, where's my tape? I'm gonna take my tape measure, right? The camera's set up on set. The shot's here, looking that way. Actor's standing over there somewhere. I'm gonna take my tape measure and I'm going to measure that focused distance. So I'm going to go up here on top. I've put a little screw up here. You can't really see it because it's black. But I'm going to attach my tape and I'm going to run it out to where the actor's standing. I'm going to find out how far away from the camera they are. Whatever this measured distance is, it's going to correspond somewhere on this lens. There's going to be a focus mark for that distance. And I'm just going to set the lens to that distance. Let's say it's 10 feet. There's 10 feet. That's what a focus puller is doing. I don't need to look through the viewfinder to perform that duty. I just need a tape. I need a follow focus hooked to the camera, and I need some way to get at it when the camera's rolling so that I can focus the lens without even having to look through the viewfinder. A lot of guys nowadays will have a remote monitor hooked up to the camera with a remote focus motor and then a control, so they can be standing 15 feet away. Operators next to the camera, the director's next to the camera. Maybe they got an actor standing here delivering off camera lines. There's nowhere for me to stand. So I'll go back a few feet. I'll use a remote monitor and a wireless focus assist, which is basically a piece of gear similar to this, but the wheel will be with me and my portable monitor, and then it's radio controlled. It'll just turn a motor that I attach to the lens. And then I can stand back from the crowd and I can still focus by looking at the monitor. But most of the time for the day-to-day grind, I want to be standing right here. So as long as I can get in there in some way, shape, or form, I want to be next to the camera so that I'm close to it when the camera operator's done and he wants to set it down, but he doesn't know what to do with it. Or a lot of times the camera operators they'd be done and they would just toss the camera over their shoulder, assuming that I was going to be back there to catch the thing when they let go. And if I wasn't, the camera would hit the deck, right? So that was another reason why I didn't want to be 15 feet away if I didn't have to be. So only if I had to be would I use a remote system and stand further away from the camera. But I wanted to be as close to this rig as I could. So when the operator was done and he went to hand it off, I'd be there to catch it and walk it over and put it on the camera cart or put it back on the dolly or whatever we were doing. Okay. So if you're a camera assistant, you want to be close to that device to ensure its safety. All right. So follow focus is mounted. EVF is mounted. Battery. The lens is on there. The only other thing we might want is if we're going to start using filtration on our camera, polarizers or colored filters or whatever, we'll talk about those in a couple of weeks. But if I'm going to use filters on the camera, I got to do one of two things. I got to invest in a set of really big filters that will thread right on the front of this lens. And this is 114 millimeters in diameter. Okay. So a filter this size, just a basic colored filter, would run about $400. Okay. Or we can use cheaper filters, which are merely cut glass. They don't have any threads or anything. It's just a piece of glass and it might have a colored dye suspended in it. And that goes in something called a matte box, which is a gimmick that looks like this. And this performs a few different functions. It'll hold filters, cut glass filters, and they're usually square, not always, but usually square. And they go in these little trays that go inside the matte box in these little slots, okay? And then the matte box is gonna fit around the front of the lens. This is called the throat. So the throat's gonna go over the front of the lens, and it's got a couple of rod receivers right here. And these are gonna ride on the rod bed and secure everything together. And I can adjust the height of the rod receivers right here with an Allen wrench. I've already done that ahead of time. It's for the ease of discussion. Okay, but different cameras might have a different lens set from the rod bed. They're supposed to be consistent from brand to brand, but let's face it, these, you know, these manufacturers, every once in a while, they do their own thing regardless to make you buy their proprietary accessories, right? So aftermarket manufacturers make all their stuff adjustable, and then you just got to go in and fit it by hand. The other thing about this matte box is it'll take a variety of lens fronts or filters, like this big round recess right here. I have some filters that are actually round. We call them drop-ins, and they're 138 millimeters, which is what this is right here in the open throat without an adapter. But I want to attach it to the lens, so I'm going to use a little reduction ring, okay, to make this go from 138 to 114. And that just goes in the throat like that, so that the whole thing goes onto the rods like that, fits over the front of the lens like that, and then I lock it in place right here with another drag lock. And again, just finger tight like that. Okay, and what that does is it mounts the matte box to the rods, but the matte box is also mounted to the front of the lens, and the lens is mounted to the camera. What I've done by using a box that works this way is I've now married all those parts together into one locked up unit. So no matter where you grab this, right, parts aren't going to fly off this camera. And I really like that arrangement. Not everybody uses equipment that works this way, but I stressed, and everything that I recommended for UCF does what I call locks together, right? So that it creates one big piece. Because again, in my day, the camera operators were notorious for grabbing these devices any old way they could, working hastily. So there's some myth out there that film people are working at breakneck speed and we don't have time to do anything, which is absolute nonsense, okay? It's not, the real world isn't like that. If you need time to do something as a camera assistant, the assistant directors are going to allow for that, because why wouldn't they, right? If they don't, it jeopardizes the quality of the product. So we're never working so fast that we can't accomplish things. But for some reason, these operators think that a fraction of a second that they can save by grabbing the camera by the matte box and the battery and pulling it off the tripod is somehow the best way to deal with this piece of gear. And my response to that is horseshit, but they do it. And so if my matte box is locked to the camera, they can abusively grab the camera like this and get away with it. And I feel okay because I know that it's all locked together. But could you imagine if this matte box wasn't attached in both places? It would probably break off the front of this camera, because right now with all this stuff on here, this camera weighs about 25 pounds. And this is a plastic matte box with 2 screws that hold it to the rod bracket. Those 2 little tiny screws through a thin piece of plastic are not going to support 25 pounds of leverage pressure when you yank it off the tripod. And this matte box would come ripping right off the rods if it wasn't also locked to the front of the lens. That's why I like locking matte boxes. Swing away matte boxes don't offer that kind of security. So if you have a matte box that's designed to swing away, and what that does is it allows you to change lenses easier. If it swings away, then it's only got one point of contact on the camera, and you must be very careful with the swing away matte box because you can tear it right off the rods. Okay. If I wanted to change lenses with this accessory, I've got to undo the rod bracket and then ease it off the rods and off the front of the lens. Now, if I wanted to go to a zoom lens, for instance, here's a Tokina 16 to 28 millimeter zoom. Take off the rear cap. I'm gonna remove the 50. To do that, I've got to back the focus assist off of the lens. So I loosen the bottom, pull it away from the lens gears, push my lens release button, which is way back here, and rotate that bad boy off the camera, okay? Then I take my 16 to 28. It's gonna ride on the camera like that. there's my red dot. Okay. That's what I want to line up on the front of the camera. I want to open my iris all the way so that it, the operator can see through it right away, nice and bright. And I roll the focus to infinity so that the minute I put this lens on the camera, if the operator happens to be looking through here while I'm doing this, the lens goes on and they can immediately see the image. And it's not buzzed out of focus by having the lens be set somewhere weird. Okay, so it's at infinity. And I put it on, rotate it in, listen for the click, put the focus wheel back on the teeth of the lens, lock that down. And then I take my matte box and I install it back on the rods. Let's put my adapter on. Lock that on and lock it on the rods, just like that. And now I've gone from a 50mm prime lens with only one focal point of view, and I'm now using a zoom lens, which has 16 to 28. Oh, I put my focus assist on the zoom by accident. Pull that out. Here's the focus teeth out here. So I got to move this thing forward like so. Lock it back in place. Engage the teeth and then lock that in place. Now I can set the focus on the zoom lens here. And that's a fully built Ursa Mini for cinematic application. Okay. So if you're doing your capstone project or you're doing your master's thesis film, you're probably going to want this unit with, we have a set of zooms and a set of prime lenses that you can use with this camera. And that's kind of your workflow. Okay. If you're shooting a feature film. If you're not, there's lots of different stuff you can do. If you're a vlogger, right? So I talked about the GH4. Here's a GH4. It's a lot like the GH5. In fact, my GH5 is kind of tucked back there. They basically look the same. This one's just a generation older than the GH5. The 4K isn't as powerful. It doesn't do high-speed 4K. It only does 24p 4K. But it has a small, what we call a mini cinema prime on it. But you can see that just like its big brother, it's got teeth for the focus gears. It's got your footage on the barrel. It's got your f-stop ring. Okay. Just like the big lens, just like the Zine Prime by Rokinon. Okay. But it's a little bit smaller. The front of this lens is only 77mm. It's about half the size of the Zine. Okay. But they're basically doing the same thing. So if size is more important to you than build, if you're shooting in a car, for instance, if you're going to do, like if you're doing actors in cars or coffee in cars with comedians, right? You're doing a TV show for, what is that? TMZ or something, right? And you got to be in a car for 8 hours a day. You might only want a camera this size that's very, very small. So you can work inside the compartment of the car with a very compact imager, right? Well, you're not going to work as efficiently with this big camera in a car. All right. It's just too big and unwieldy for you to get all the different angles you might want to get. Okay. If you're shooting in a reality TV kind of scenario where you're in the car for 2 hours at a time and the camera's constantly rolling and you're filming whatever happens within that 2 hours. Now, if you're doing it piece by piece by piece, because it's a car chase and the movie is Jason Bourne, you might use a bigger camera because you're only doing it a few moments at a time. And then you're rebuilding the rig and remounting the camera and you're taking your time to do it. Okay. That's a different workflow on a different project. Okay, so what this camera is good for, this camera might be ill-suited for, and vice versa, right? The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera is even smaller. right? And this has got a Panasonic 14 millimeter prime on here, which is tiny. This is really a photographic lens. But on a camera like this, it's so small. Where's my red dot? There it is. It's so small. I mean, if you really wanted to, like you can see, I've got a cage wrapped around this thing. So I could attach stuff to this if I really wanted to. But gosh, this is so nice and tiny. You know, a friend of mine, Rodney Charters, shot 24. He also shot Dallas. When this camera came out, he was shooting Dallas at the time. And he was using this camera right here to shoot car interiors because the car would really be driving down the road. The actors would really be driving and sitting in the back seat. And he could operate this tiny camera or mount it on the dashboard, for instance, and get some very nice angles inside the car because the camera's not taking up any room. It's not in the way. And it shot full HD, which, you know, it's a TV series going for broadcast. So whatever their original file sizes were, whether they were 4K or not, by the time they went to broadcast, their finished files for broadcast were HD. If this shoots HD and all you need is HD, but this size of this camera will facilitate shooting inside I think the first scene he did was inside a limousine. It was a limousine scene. And there was like several people in the limo. By the time you put like 5 or 6 people in a limo and a camera operator, there's no room for this. This is too big. So they used these. And if you watch the show, I guarantee you're not going to be able to tell me what shots were done on this and what shots were done on the full-size studio camera. You're not going to be able to tell. The quality from this is very good. And if it only needs to be HD, it doesn't matter if this one's doing it or this one's doing it. It's still HD. Same. Okay. So don't be afraid of a piece of gear this small. It can work for you and if it's the right situation. 60D is the same thing, but the 60D, it's got a little bit different kind of sensor. The sensor is not, well, I mean, the sensor's okay. It's just, it's an APS-C sensor. It's really designed for photographs. So it has a photographic aspect ratio, a 4:3 aspect ratio. Okay, so if you're shooting 16:9 HD, it has to take that wider rectangle out of the stubbier one, and you end up not using part of the imager. So you essentially have less resolution effectively by punching into the chip to get the right rectangle shape. So cameras like this are natively 16:9. You can see the sensor in there. You see the green area, how it's more of a skinny rectangle. The imager inside this one is Super 35, which is a 185 rectangle, very much like your TV. And then the Micro Four Thirds rectangle in here is similar to the APS-C, but the reason why is so that you can use special lenses called anamorphics on a GH5 and shoot the widescreen format in the 4.3 aspect ratio. So that's specifically why these cameras have the sensor that they have. Okay. Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Okay. It's a little bit bigger than the GH5. All right. But here it is with a cinema zoom lens on here. Here's a DZO 10-24. Again, it's got the teeth, nice smooth focus, nice smooth focal length adjustment, nice smooth aperture adjustment. Okay. And still not too bad size-wise compared to the Ursa Mini. So this is actually, and this is a very powerful 4K camera. This will shoot 60 frames at 4K. This one will not shoot 60 frames at 4K, I don't think, unless it's been updated. Might have been updated. But this is a good camera for Steadicam because look at the size of the monitor that it has built into the back of this thing. Okay, here's the monitor on the old pocket camera. And you can see the difference in the size of the two monitors now. This one's a lot bigger. The monitor on the Ursa Mini is, I think, slightly smaller. Just slightly. Pretty close though. So we got the same size monitors, more powerful processor because the chip, the imager in here is newer than the Ursa Mini, 4.6K. But this is only 4K and this is 4.6K native. So you have a little bit more resolution in this camera than you do in this camera, okay? But again, with your cinema lens. So there's lots of different tools out there. You just have to sort of pick the one that works best for you based on the specs and based on what you're going to shoot, and then go for it. And if you've never used that piece of gear before, try to rent it. When the Pocket 4K came out, when it first came out, this little guy down here, B&H would get in 100 units and they would sell them out the same day that they arrived. So they were perpetually out of stock on this camera when it first came out because it was really popular and they had been talking about it for months and months before it was released. And so it had an audience waiting for it. The minute it hit the shelves, people were calling in, buying them up, and they were all gone. But there were over here in Oviedo at the Lens Pal, you could rent this camera for a week for $100. The camera cost when it was brand new, I think $1,600. So for $100, you could rent it for a week and test it, fully test it, and make sure the specs were right for you, make sure all your equipment fit on it, and you could build it out the way you wanted to or whatever. Know everything about that camera before you actually spent the other $1,600 on your own. Or you could rent it and shoot a project on it for $100 instead of buying it for $1,600, right? So that was where the Lens Pal was a really good idea when the Ursa, when the Pocket 4K camera first came out, okay? And the same with all these other cameras at one time or another were available to rent. So, but this is your flagship build, okay? So there's lots of different lenses we can put on these cameras, and there's the only other thing you might consider is an external monitor. And so there's a couple of reasons why you might want an external monitor. The first reason is, look how much bigger it is than the onboard. Okay, so here's your onboard monitor, is this size, and here's your external monitor. Considerably different. The larger monitor will show you better sharpness. So if you're using it to focus, you have a much bigger image to focus from. The larger monitor will also show you a broader range of accurate color as opposed to the smaller monitor. This monitor happens to be 3 times brighter than this monitor. So if you're working outside and you can't really see this monitor very well, this monitor is 3 times brighter and easier to see and use outdoors. The other thing that this monitor does that this camera will do, but this as a monitor will also do, is it's a recorder and a monitor. So on the back side, we have solid state drives that fit right in here, okay? So I have I think this is a 500 gigabyte SSD in here, right? So I can use this as my principal recording device, or you can see my key light, or I can use this as a redundant recording device. So I can record to the camera's media, which is back here on CFast cards, right? Or I can record to this guy on a larger capacity solid state drive for longer record duration. Or sometimes, especially when these cameras first come out, invariably there's going to be one recording mode that they can't do in camera. And initially it was the really high speed recording rates. The cameras could do 24 or 30p, but if you wanted to shoot at 60 or 120p, you could only do it to an external monitor, which then had no speed limitations because all it's doing is recording to solid state media. There's no moving parts like that are in here to interfere with the frame rate. So you could pipe the video from the processor out of the camera into the recorder and get your high frame rates or your really high resolutions. Or HDR, high dynamic range images. A lot of times the only way to record those will be through an Atomos monitor and not by the camera. The processor will see the high dynamic range file, but it won't be able to write it to the media because the media is not sufficient. But a 500 gigabyte hard drive will record HDR images just fine because it has the capacity that the CFast doesn't have. Okay, so that would be the reasons why you might want to use an external monitor. And then you can attach it. This one, you can see I've got a cage on it. So it's got more mounting holes and more solutions for attaching this thing to the camera. So I can take something like a a Matthews arm or a Naga arm like this, and say mount it to the top of the camera, mount it to the bottom of the monitor, and then I could mount an external monitor on top of the camera if I wanted to. Okay, so it's kind of like Tinker Toys for grown-ups. You can build these things out to whatever shape and configuration you need to do the job at hand. It just takes a budget to acquire either by purchasing or renting all these different parts. But you can totally build this thing out to virtually shoot any kind of project you need to shoot. Okay. So if it's a professional commercial, right? Say you're shooting I don't know, say you get hired to shoot a Mercedes commercial in Orlando. Stranger things have happened, right? You're probably not going to shoot it on one of these small cameras. You might get away with it on here. You might get away with it on the pocket camera. You would never get away with it on a 60D or even a 5D because they don't generate the quality of images that you would need for a car commercial for broadcast, especially a national car commercial. This one does, though. You might shoot it on this. And then you got to know how to build it and how to approach using it. You got to understand that this is a certain way of working. You need help if you're going to shoot with this kind of camera and be effective with it. You can be a one-man band and use this camera and get away with it on a documentary where you've got a little bit more time. But on a commercial where you're shooting a lot of content in a single day, you probably have a crew to help you man this device so that you can get the right kind of results from it. Okay. So it's just about qualifying your tools to the work that you need to do. Okay. Any question about this business? Any thoughts? Like I said, I mean, this whole business right here is about 25 or 30 pounds. It's pretty big. You can see now what that shoulder pad was for. If I wanted to operate this camera, I could put the focus wheel on this side and focus it. I can look through the viewfinder on my side, right? And I can operate it like an ENG style camera if I was shooting a documentary. Okay. But it's pretty big. It's not going to fit on your average DJI Ronin gimbal because it's way too big and way too heavy. You'd need a full-size support device for this, like a Steadicam. Okay, but it can be done. And, if you're shooting a feature film, this is the way you want to go. Okay, it's the best quality, the best, so the lenses you're going to put on it are going to be really high quality, right? You can take a photographic lens and adapt it to go on this camera. I could make this little 50mm lens from Olympus. I could make this work on this camera if I really wanted the image that this generates for some reason. And there might be a valid reason for it. But I'm not going to do this every day for every shooting situation. It would be a disaster. Look how small this lens is compared to what I would have to use, over here to be comfortable working on a feature film. So there's a time and place for this and adapting this, and there's a time and a place for that. Okay. So that's a basic cinema build. If I reduce you guys now, put you over here, the videos that I have selected for you are here. So this is Gavin Finney talking about testing your equipment. This is the B&H photo video about tripods. It's also on web courses. I've also put a couple of videos on there about audio capture. My career has been cameras and lighting, and for the most part, audio never played a role in my gainful employment. So I don't consider myself an audio expert, okay? So I don't cover a lot of features of audio capture in my classes because you have classes that cover that. But I will say this about this camera. You can record audio and you can connect your professional microphones directly to the camera, and the camera can record your pictures and your audio if you want it to. Traditionally speaking, though, for as many years as Hollywood has been making movies, the standard practice is to never record audio with the same device that you record the video. And it's for a very good reason. And that is, if you ruin one, you also ruin the other. Okay. If you have an image, but the audio is very poor quality, you can always go into the studio and dub the audio and manufacture the audio and put it over the picture and repair that scene in post-production. But if it's all in the same media, it's harder. And the resolution of the media will be different if it's film, because your aspect ratio will change to allow for an optical track. And it's harder to edit when the audio is integrated into the picture, okay? With digital, what we see is a perfect opportunity to break those two systems in half so that we can separate the audio from the video, and we can edit and play with audio separately from video. And that's really a good way to go. So while you can hook microphones to this camera, I don't recommend working that way. A separate audio recorder, I think, is the way to go, because the specs of a separate audio recorder are going to be better than the specs in the video camera. Why? Because this camera is built and designed to give you the optimal photographic result. And then it also gives you some audio as an afterthought. But an audio recorder designed specifically to record sound, dialogue, for instance, if that's all it's designed for, it's going to have way better internal working systems than the camera is going to have. Better preamps, better knobs, better control, finer control, better menus, different menus, more microphone connectivity, line connectivity and stuff, so you can pipe audio to different sources and stuff when you're in post-production. A separate audio recorder is always a better way to go, and somebody to adjust that equipment while you're filming. So in other words, you'd have an audio mixer person and then a person operating a boom, and usually you can mount a microphone to the camera, but more often than not, what they do is they mount the microphone to a boom, so that that boom and that microphone can be pointed at whatever talent they want to take the good sound from. And if it's on the camera, the microphone is always going to point at what the camera is pointing at. But if for some reason the camera is pointed at something that is not the source of the dialogue, and the microphone would be better served pointed, say, in that direction, but the camera's pointed in this direction, you're going to get bad audio. So they put the microphone on a boom instead, and then a boom operator will point the microphone exactly where it needs to be to capture the sound that they want for that shot. Okay, so it's better to have the audio in separate devices from the camera. But if you want to run it through the camera, you can, and there's a place to do that. On the top of the camera, you have a couple of professional audio ports, XLR audio ports, right up here. Okay, they go right into the top of the camera, right behind the carry handle, and you can hook your microphones in here. And then to control the quality of the audio, you have to go inside under the under the flip out screen, and then you have your preamp adjustments right here. You've got your gain adjustments for your right and left signal on your audio. And then if you go into the menu system, by these buttons, you can adjust to a certain degree the amplitude of the audio, and you can adjust a couple of things here. But like I said, the audio specs of this camera, they're okay. They're good in a pinch. They're good if that's all you got to work with. But I would prefer a separate audio recorder and separate microphones. Okay. That's my opinion, but it's the opinion of most professional filmmakers, because there's somebody out there that makes a living by just recording audio. And if you're running it through the camera and the camera assistants are taking care of it for you, you just put you put two people out of a job, and that doesn't fly in Hollywood. So camera people, we don't deal with audio. Audio people deal with audio. And it's even a separate union designation. So you have a different union card for audio than you do for camera work. Right. And I think that's the best of all worlds, because, you know, why put somebody out of a job? You know, I'm all for hiring as many people as possible. You know, the studios spend $200 million on movies, and it's our job to take it from them. Okay, so that's your studio camera. And that's your audio question. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about, oh, here's something interesting. Can you guys see my screen okay? Okay. So if you wanted to use your Blackmagic Pocket camera, but you wanted to have a little bit of flexibility, you wanted to build it out a little bit, there are accessories that you can do this with. So here's an example of a rod bed for a Canon 60D, right here. Here's what we call a cage system, or a half cage. This is for a Panasonic GH4. So you can apply a top handle and a side handle if you want to hold this camera in a different method than the photo posture, right? If you wanted to hold this maybe with a handle further out here, or maybe you're left-handed and you want the handle on this side of the camera, but there isn't one, right? So with a camera cage like that, you could put a handle on this side if you wanted it or needed it. You could also put a top handle on here, okay, by using the camera cage. There's different kinds of cages. This is called a C cage. This wraps around the entire camera. This was the first style of cage that came out on the market when the 5D became very popular. Stuff like the small rig cages that are available now, like these have all been manufactured using CNC machining, and they've been designed in a computer with CAD. And a lot of these cages are custom designed and custom cut to fit specific cameras. Okay, whereas a C cage was a very generic sort of shape that was built to accommodate a variety of different camera shapes. And you could apply it to a number of different cameras that were out there. If you wanted to add things like top handles and rods and stuff to a camera that didn't ordinarily accommodate those things, you could do it with a C cage. So these were popular for quite a while in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, before we started doing more complex stuff like Small Rig or Zacuto are doing. And you just mounted your camera inside the C cage like this, and it afforded you rods on the side or the bottom or the top, and you could apply handles, microphones, all kinds of stuff, audio recorders. It was a way of accessorizing out a camera that wasn't really designed to be accessorized. It was designed to be held and controlled, boom, 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 shoot, 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 and that's it. Maybe if you had a flash unit, you put it up here. That was it, right? It's not really designed to do what this is doing. So a C cage helps you do that by giving you some accessory connectivity to your camera. This has a built-in shoulder pad, and on the other side of the camera, which I guess I didn't show you, there's a side handle here, And the camera also comes with an accessory bracket. You can move this side handle down here on this long bracket that bolts onto the camera where this normally would go. And then this attaches at the end of that accessory down here. So you have a handle down here to hold the camera on your shoulder with if you wanted to treat it more like a news gathering camera. Okay. But if you're using a 5D, you might want a shoulder rig like this one to use the 5D in the same fashion that you would use the Ursa Mini for an ENG style shoot. If all you had was a 5D, but you were asked to shoot, you know, I don't know, some run and gun interviews at an event, you can get a lot of camera shake when you hold a camera out at arm's length like this and you try to shoot video with it. It's more stable if you can put some weight on the shoulder and balance the whole deal from a pivot point that moves a lot less than at the end of your hands, right? So a shoulder rig can offer you a fairly stable place to mount or to hold a camera, a big camera or a small camera for that matter, because you've got handles that put it way out here, right? But they rest the weight of the camera on your shoulder. So your shoulder supports the weight of the rig. Your hands are out here on two handles that can steer everything properly. And then your camera's mounted somewhere in the middle, and this can be adjusted forward or backwards to balance the weight. And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. Here's two different kinds of shoulder rigs. Okay. This one also has a battery. You can put a battery like the Anton Bauer on this shoulder rig I'm showing you here in the back, and it's got all this power connectivity back here as well for your different devices like your monitor and stuff. So I showed you in the beginning of this discussion this ridiculous build of a Canon. This is a looks like a 5D, right in the middle of this big erector set is a Canon 5D with a Canon EF lens. They put a matte box on it, an external monitor, a C cage, a bigger battery that lasts longer than the onboard battery, handles for handheld with a shoulder pad and counterweight. And even this guy right here, which is we call a whip, which is all it does is basically extend the focus wheel way out here on this flexible rod so that if you were holding the rig and walking around handheld, I can't necessarily grab right onto the camera as you're maneuvering around handheld. But if it's on a whip that's kind of flexible, I can be out here and I can still rotate the whip and rotate the lens and focus the lens as a result. Okay. So it gets as weird and wild as that if you want it to. This is how we used to do handheld back in the old days. I'd stand there with a whip about 2 feet away from the camera on this long flexible rod, and I would just turn it like that and the lens would focus. And then I would pray I got it right and go to dailies the next day and hope I didn't get fired. So your build out can get as ridiculous as this if you really wanted it to. I mean, if you already own a 5D and you're trying to make it do a variety of different things, then this is sometimes the lengths you have to go to. What's this? I was going to say something about red, but I don't really remember. Except maybe the fact that Zacuto is one of several manufacturers that make accessories for your digital video cameras so that you can adapt them, modify them, increase their flexibility, increase their ease of use, increase their complexity. Manufacturers like Wooden Camera, Manfrotto, Small Rig, Kami TV, Camvate, Camrar, ProAim, Shape, Fotka, 8Sim, and Tilta. All these manufacturers are out there making bits and bobs that you can attach to your camera. They're all present. They all have a presence on either eBay or Amazon or both. B&H carries a lot of these brands already. So you can go just to the B&H website and look for rigging systems, camera rigging systems, or camera cages. And you'll see a lot of this stuff by brand on the B&H website. I showed you a couple of different cinema lenses today. I'll talk more about those next week. The only thing that I wanted to show you today was the focus system. So remember that these cinema lenses have teeth, and they're on at least the focus ring, if not also the f-stop ring or the t-stop ring. And you control the focus by the follow focus device, which is a control wheel, a rod bracket, and then a gearbox, which turns the rate of rotation 90 degrees so that it can rest against the side of the barrel of the lens. And as you turn the knob this way, the lens rotates this way. Okay, so all this is it's what we call a transfer case. And as you turn this wheel in one direction, it turns this wheel in a different direction, and it allows you to remotely focus that lens. Follow focus will also have a dry erase ring incorporated in it so that you can transfer the lens markings off the barrel of your cinema lens to the focus wheel. So if you got your cinema lens here with all these distances, these focus distances on there, right? As you turn that focus wheel, the lens is turning and it's telling you what distance you're set to. And you can transfer all this information to your focus wheel so that if you can't see the lens barrel from where you've got to stand to control focus, but you can see your focus wheel, you still have the information. You can make the right focus adjustments. Pulling focus is a very complex job. And if you do it well in Hollywood, you will work a lot and probably always be a focus puller if that's what you want to be, and make a very, very good living at it. Okay, because it's not easy. And once you learn how to do it, if you acquire that skill and you're good at it, you will be highly sought after. Because we still, to this day, even though the cameras could start to accommodate autofocus if we really wanted it to, again, it takes a job away from somebody, a job that's been there for over 100 years. Okay, for over 100 years, there have been focus pullers on movies. And now, just because somebody like Canon comes out with an auto-focusing camera, we're going to eliminate generations of people who have earned livings, bought houses, cars, had families, got married, sent kids to college, all on the money they earned by being focus pullers in Hollywood. The economics would strongly fight against an autofocus standard in the industry, but it's creeping in there a little bit at a time. In another 10 years, we may actually not have focus pullers anymore. But for now, we got them. And if you're good at it now, you can earn 6 figures easy being a focus puller in LA. Easy. I did it. All right. Blah, blah, blah. So focus wheels, marks on the dry erase. If your lens doesn't have teeth integrated in it, and I showed you a still lens, here's one. I mean, on my 60D, here's a Tokina 11 to 16 millimeter zoom lens. It's a photographic lens, and it's got the rubber non-slip grips because it's designed to be operated with finger touch control, right? But if you wanted to turn this into something that functioned more like a cinema lens, you need these teeth, right? So what you can do is you can apply a focus gear to the outside of the barrel of your photographic lens, and it just kind of snaps on and tightens down by that screw that you see on the screen there. And you can apply a set of teeth to this photographic lens, and you can essentially turn this into a cinema lens by doing that. It's a little clunky and a little unwieldy compared to having it integrated into the design of the lens itself. This is much cleaner and much more easy to deal with. But if you don't have access to cinema lenses and you can't afford to buy them and you can't afford to rent them, but you got a really great set of photographic lenses, you can adapt them by using focus rings. And they come in a couple of different sizes. This is a hard focus ring. It's made out of plastic so that it's kind of flexible. Some of them are even made with 3D scanners. And then we got the rubber kind, which you can trim to size if you want to. And you can attach them to your lenses and leave them on if you only ever use them for video. And so there's a couple of different ways to add gears to your photographic lenses. This is basically what I mentioned to you earlier. But there's a couple of audio tutorials on web courses as well. Curtis Judd is a really good YouTuber who does a lot of videos about audio recording and microphones and stuff. And so I picked his dual system, which is what I described to you a few minutes ago, dual system recording method. And then I've got this fella here, which is his company is called Solemn Films. And he's just talking about the types of audio gear that they use for doing commercial industrial video. And that's about as much as I want to touch on audio, because like I said, you got classes that are going to teach you about audio, and I don't want to get into that other teacher's sort of domain. I want to kind of stay separate. So the last thing I was going to talk about, which you already kind of dealt with, is your slate. So I got a slate here. We talked about the sync point that it's designed to create. We talked about the slate having particular information on it, like the media, how many rolls of film, how many media cards have you used so far on which cameras, the scene number you're working on, the number of takes you're going per shot. The name of the movie is usually at the top. The name of the director is across the center. The name of the cinematographer is usually below the name of the director. And then we got some stuff like the date. If you used a filter, you got a little room here to kind of write in there what filter you used. You can either circle sync or circle MOS, with sound and without sound, right? Sometimes you shoot an insert that doesn't require audio. So you'll shoot it what we call MOS, which is a German phrase, without sound, which is without sound. Interior or exterior designation, day or night designation, just circle the one that works for you. Sometimes you use a little tape tab and just cover the thing that you don't want to acknowledge. Like, so if you were shooting with sound, you'd cover MOS with a little tab of tape, stuff like that. I used to go to the makeup people back when I was a young camera assistant, and I would get the powder puffs from the makeup department because they made a perfect eraser pad for the slate. And I'd tape them right to the end of my dry erase markers, just like this, so that when I wanted to write on the slate, I just pull the cap off, roll A7, scene 63, Baker, take 2, right? And then we'd roll camera. Oh, cut, something's wrong. We got to go to take 3. I've already got my eraser pad right on the end of my dry erase, change it to 3, and we're off and running, right? So I used to get these, the makeup department would save them for us in a big Ziploc bag. And once a week, I'd go to the hair and makeup trailer and I would beg them for their used makeup puffs. These are the, for dabbing the shiny spots. And these were great. We called them, call it a mouse, slate mouse. The other option was, of course, you could use your dry erase and then just use like a cloth, but then you got this thing you got to have hanging out of your pocket, and it's, it's kind of a pain. So that's basically it, I think. But what I don't think the guy covered in the slating video was a couple of options that you have for slates. And one of them was this really cool option here, which is called a DigiSlate. And what it is it's an app for your iPad. So if you've got an iPad, you go into your iPad and look for, other way. There it is, DigiSlate. Okay, so now I've got this digital slate here, and you can put your show name up here. Right now it's got the operating instructions, but you can put your show name up there and all your stuff you put on a normal slate. And then when you swipe it, it gives you a sync sound. So you'd hold that in front of the lens and just get your sync sound that way, which I think is pretty cool. And it's a free app. So if you got an iPad and you want to use your iPad, the reason you might want to do this is because, like, if you also use like DJI gimbals for camera support, or if you use DJI drones, those companies also make apps that you can control those devices through a laptop as well, or through an iPad. So you might have other reasons to have your iPad on set, And then you could also be using it as a digital slate as well if you wanted to. And this one's showing you time code if you want to, which is something that a dumb slate doesn't do, right? So if you're just using a regular dumb slate like this one, there's no time code. All you have is your sync clap. That's it to line up in post-production the old-fashioned way. But if you want to use time code, you can have time code running in this box right here in red. And when you smack the sticks, the time code will freeze and show you that data. And that's what the editors will use to line your audio and your picture up as well in post-production, and it syncs stuff up really fast. So this works as a smart slate and as a digital app, as opposed to a traditional old plastic slate. Okay. And the app is free, but you got to have the iPad to do it. So the iPad might cost you a couple $100 so that you could get the free app and use it as a slate, or you could buy a plastic slate for $15. So it's whatever you want to do. I think that kind of covers it for today. I think I probably talked your ear off long enough. Anybody have any thoughts or questions about any of this nonsense? Here's something. Last thing, a chip chart. This is for recording standardized colors, like Pantone colors, on the head of every shot you take with the camera. And so this is a standard dye marker, right? These boards have been manufactured to be extremely color accurate for each of these hues. So if you put this card in front of your camera and photograph it, especially under whatever lighting you're using, or if you're outside at a particular time of day where the sun is, not in its zenith, so it might be a range of different colors from blue to orange, right? And you put this chip chart in front before you do your slate, show your chip chart, then do your slate, then back out and shoot your shot. The post-production people that are doing color correction can use this as a benchmark standard. They can use this chip chart, this color chart, okay, to correct your colors for you on your shot so that they are neutral and accurate. Okay, a lot of cinematographers will use these so that they have a baseline standard that they can start from when they just go in to start editing or color correcting. They can see what the baseline neutral standard looks like in terms of color balance, and then they can adjust it accordingly based on what they want: warmer, cooler, color, different flesh tone variations, by manipulating the color correction. So it's always good to know what the baseline is first before you start adjusting and manipulating stuff. So if you shoot a chip chart, we call these a chip chart, shoot that first. So embedded in the file are a set of color standards. And then the color correction folks in post-production will adjust your clip to those color standards on a vector scope probably. And now you've got a perfect place to start your color correction from. Okay, so that's the only other thing I wanted to talk to you about today is a chip chart. Okay, and you can buy these off Amazon for like $10 or $12, I think. Yeah, $12.95. So, if you're a camera assistant, if this is going to be your gig, especially if you're a second AC, you should have your own slate, even if it's a dumb slate. You should have your own slate. You should have your own chip chart. You should have your own gray cards. There's a grayscale incorporated in this chip chart, so you don't need a separate gray card. This is a tonal scale. This is also something that the post-production people will use to generate an accurate exposure from the clip that you shot. Okay. One of these is what we call a medium gray standard. I think it's this one here, third from the left. And if they adjust the right density to this gray in post-production, when you look at the clip played back that this was photographed with, it'll appear to be perfectly exposed. Or it will look like the way you exposed it. And then you can tell if it's too dark or too light based on how it was committed to the camera. And then you can adjust it in post to better suit how you want it to look. So these are things that you can do in camera to give your post-production people a little help with color correction later. Okay, that makes sense? Okay. Your reading assignment is out of the Intro to Cinematography book, the basic text, and it's chapter 4A, Assembling the Camera and Prep to Shoot. Okay. So this is out of the Hoser book. So have a look at that chapter. And next week, I want to take the discussion about lenses a little bit further and explain to you, the real differences between cinema lenses and photographic lenses, for instance. And I want to dispel some myths because there's a lot of bad information out there, and I'm going to fix that for you. So you don't have to ever worry again about some knucklehead on YouTube giving you the wrong information. And then you'll be that much more informed when it comes time for you to start renting or, buying gear. Okay. So that's it. Unless somebody's got some questions for me, that's what I have for you for today. Any thoughts?
I'm not sure if you've said it, but why are they called chip charts?
Because they have color chips. We used to call them color chips. A lot like the production designer uses stuff similar to that as well. If they're trying to calibrate colors, specifically paint colors, textile colors, or whatever, they'll have what they call a paint chip book, right? And it's the whole range of colors available, either from a particular brand or like Pantone standard colors. So if you're an artist, you'll know what Pantone colors are. It's a set of standardized colors with dye markers and coordinates so that you can, if you're doing printing, post-production printing, like at a print shop, you can dial in a specific shade of red by giving it its Pantone dye marker number, right? And if it's, I forget what red is, but let's say it's 47. Let's say the shade of red that you wanted on your, I don't know, whatever, your poster was red 474, right? They dial that Pantone 474 into their print machine and it'll spit out exactly the tone of red that you wanted. Okay. Those are color standards. Okay. So the chips on that card are, painted to the standards for video. It's like what is it? 760 nanometers is red in video language, and 460 nanometers is blue in video spectral language, and all the different shades in between. We picked standard frequencies of those colors, like there's a green screen color on there. If you're shooting a green screen, the green screen standard is right there. So if your green screen is a little underlit or overlit, but the post-production supervisor wants to know exactly what the color standard is, if they don't know that it's 463 nanometers, I think, they just got to look at your chip slate in the beginning of your clip and take that value right off the film.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Good. Anybody else? Am I like speaking Greek and just totally not making any sense to anyone? Because I don't want that to happen either. So no questions? You're all expert cinematographers now? Cool. All right. Okay. All right. Have it your way. We'll touch on this stuff again next week. So have a good afternoon. Enjoy the reading. And I think I've graded all of the worksheets. So if anybody has any questions about the worksheet and you want to have a Zoom meeting or you just want to talk by phone, send me an email and let me know and we'll arrange a time. Okay. All right, then. Do I have a motion to adjourn? And a second to adjourn? I have a second on the motion to adjourn. So everybody have a good afternoon and I'll see you next week. Thanks for coming. Bye.